The day my parents introduced my brother as our pride and joy, our only son, while I was standing right next to them, something inside me went silent. Not angry, not shocked, just silent like a switch flipped. And maybe that was the moment everything changed. Maybe that was the moment I finally understood where I truly stood in my own family. Or maybe it was just the moment I stopped pretending not to notice the things that had been happening for years. Either way, that single sentence would lead me down a path I never expected, one that forced me to make a choice I never thought I'd have to make. Growing up, I learned early that fairness was something other families talked about. In our home, everything revolved around my brother, his achievements, his needs, his dreams, even his mistakes. He was the golden child, the miracle, the one they bragged about to neighbors and relatives. And me? I became the quiet background character in my own house. The one who got good grades but never heard a well done. The one who helped out but never got a thank you. I wasn't angry back then, I just thought that was normal. I thought maybe every family had a favorite and maybe I just wasn't meant to be that person. But as we got older, the difference in how they treated us grew louder. For my brother, there were celebrations for the smallest things. A decent test score. A sports medal. Even when he tried something and failed, they still called him strong and brave. For me, praise was rare. If I accomplished something, they'd nod, maybe smile, then quickly return to talking about him. I tried not to mind. I told myself it didn't bother me. I told myself I didn't need the attention. But deep down, it hurt in a way I didn't have words for. The real shift happened the year I turned 16. I started building small tech projects, basic software tools, apps, little things like that. It was just a hobby at first, something that made me feel proud of myself for once. Soon, people online started noticing. A few teachers at school encouraged me, one even helped me join a local tech program. And for the first time ever, I felt like I had something of my own. Something I wasn't overshadowed in. My parents didn't pay much attention. They were too busy focusing on my brother's college plans. And honestly, I didn't expect them to care. But my projects kept growing. Slowly, I began helping people solve problems through simple tech solutions. Eventually, a small local company even asked me to build something for them. I was so excited to tell my parents, not because I wanted praise but because I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally see me as more than the extra child in the room. But they barely reacted. My mom nodded like I'd told her what I had for lunch. My dad said, "That's good," then immediately turned to my brother to talk about his upcoming exams. I smiled and pretended it didn't matter. But that night, I sat alone in my room realizing how heavy the silence felt. Things stayed the same for a while. My brother celebrated big milestones, and my parents showered him with their usual devotion. I kept working on my projects quietly, building skills, building confidence, building something I hoped would turn into a future that belonged to me, not to my brother's shadow. Then came the day everything changed. My parents had guests over, family friends we'd known since childhood. The kind of people who always compared kids, always asked about grades, jobs, and achievements. My brother had just shared some news about getting into a competitive university program. Everyone clapped, hugged him, congratulated my parents. Then their friend turned to me and smiled politely. "And how about you? What have you been up to?" Before I could open my mouth, my mom gently placed her hand on my arm, almost like she didn't want me to speak. She smiled at the guests and said, "Oh, she's doing fine. Nothing major. But our son, our pride and joy, our only son, he's really making us proud." The room froze for me. Everything else kept happening, people talking, laughing, praising, but I only heard those 4 words echoing in my head. Our only son. I guess she didn't mean it literally. I guess it was just a slip of emotion, a phrase she'd said 100 times before. But to say it while I was standing right there, like I was invisible, like I didn't count, it hit differently. It felt like every quiet disappointment, every ignored achievement, every moment I'd swallowed over the years suddenly gathered in one place. I laughed softly just to myself. Not because it was funny but because it finally made sense. I finally understood the place I held in their world. Not the pride. Not the joy. Just the other child. The one who filled the empty space in family photos. That night, while they were still busy celebrating my brother, I went to my room and looked at everything I'd built over the past months. My work, my projects, my plans. For once, I wasn't thinking about pleasing anyone. I wasn't thinking about proving anything. I was thinking about what I wanted. About what I deserved. About what life could look like if I stopped waiting for people who would never see me the way I wanted them to. And I didn't know it then, but that moment would become the beginning of a decision that would shake my entire family. A decision that would force them to finally look at me, really look at me, for the first time. Because when they realized what I had quietly built, when they discovered how successful my small tech projects had become, when they suddenly started paying attention for all the wrong reasons, something happened that none of us saw coming. Something that pushed me to a breaking point I didn't even know I had. And it all began the day they called him their only son. What I decided to do next, well, that part changed everything. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying my mother's voice in my head, that light, cheerful tone she used when she was proud. But the sentence wasn't meant for me. It never had been. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about how strange it was that a few words could push someone into finally seeing the truth. Not some dramatic fight, not a huge argument, just a sentence said casually in a living room full of people. But maybe that's how turning points work. They slip in quietly and change everything before you even know what's happening. The next morning, nothing felt different on the surface. The house was full of noise as usual. My father was making tea, my mother humming her favorite old song, and my brother getting ready to meet his friends. But something inside me had shifted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a new chapter without fully understanding it. My brother was always the center of their world. Even as kids, everyone could see it. If he fell and scraped his knee, my mom would panic like he'd broken a bone. If I fell, she'd tell me to get up and stop being dramatic. When he won a school competition, they threw a party. When I won mine, they said, "That's nice," and went back to whatever they were doing. I didn't resent him though. He wasn't the one asking for special treatment. He was just used to being the son we all rotated around. But now that I was older, the pattern felt heavier. I'd always hoped that as we grew up, they'd start seeing me too. I didn't want them to choose me over him, I just wanted to exist in the same frame. I wanted my feelings to matter. I wanted my efforts to count. And I guess the moment they called him our only son, they accidentally told me exactly how they saw me. Later that week, something unexpected happened. My father knocked on my door. He rarely did. Usually he just called from the hallway if he needed something. When I opened it, he gave me a polite smile and asked if he could come in. I nodded, a little confused. He sat at the edge of my desk chair and looked around my room like he had never been in it before. His eyes stopped on the small whiteboard where I had scribbled random ideas for my next tech project. Then he turned to me and said, "Your mother told me you've been doing computer things?" Computer things. That was the best way he could describe the work I'd been putting my heart into for the last 2 years. I simply nodded. "Is it serious?" he asked. "Or just a hobby?" Something in me tightened. Not anger, just disappointment. But I kept my voice calm and said, "It's serious, Dad. I've been working on some useful tools. And some people are actually paying for them." He blinked, almost surprised. "Paying?" "Yes." He leaned back in the chair, rubbing his chin like he was trying to process the idea. "Well, that's good," he said finally. "Keep it up." Then he stood and walked out. That was it. No curiosity, no real interest, no follow-up questions. Just a vague, "keep it up," like he was talking to a stranger's kid he barely knew. And a part of me felt something crack a little more. Still, I kept working. Maybe because it made me feel like I had control over something, even if it wasn't much. I spent the next few weeks building a tool for a small business that needed help organizing their stock system. The owner loved what I built. He even recommended me to someone else. Slowly things grew. My name started spreading in small circles. It wasn't huge or overnight, but it felt like a small spark in a dark room, something I could protect, something that belonged to me. But the real turning point happened the afternoon my parents found out how much I'd earned from one of my latest projects. Not because I wanted to show them, I had no intention of doing that, but because my mother walked into my room without knocking, something she often did. I was on a call discussing the final payment details with one of the clients. When I ended the call, she was staring at my laptop screen, her eyes wide like she had stumbled onto something she wasn't meant to see. "Did he say, that number?" she asked, almost breathless. "That much money, for your little project?" I didn't like how she said little project, but I stayed calm and answered, "Yes." She stood there silently for a long moment. Then she said something strange. "Does your brother know about this?" I frowned. Why would he? She clicked her tongue and shook her head like I was missing something obvious. Then she left the room, and for the rest of the day she acted unusually attentive. Asking if I needed anything. Asking what projects I was working on now. Asking questions she had never cared about before. A week later, the whole situation took another strange turn. My brother came into my room casually, sat on my bed and asked, "So you're making money now?" Just like that. No hello. No how are you. No interest in the work itself. Just money. I nodded. He whistled softly. "That's crazy. Mom said you're doing well." I could tell by the tone of his voice that he wasn't there out of curiosity. He wanted something. And sure enough, he finally said, "You know, I need some cash for something. Maybe you could help." I stared at him for a long time. This was my brother. The same brother who never asked about my interests, who laughed along when people called him the favorite, who never once told our parents to stop comparing us. We never had a hostile relationship, but we never had a real connection either. And suddenly he wanted help, not because he believed in me but because he saw me as a convenient wallet. I didn't answer right away. He shrugged and said, "Just think about it," then walked out. That night, I overheard my parents talking in the living room. Their voices were quiet but urgent. "She's earning now," my father said. "Real money." "Yes," my mother replied. "And we need to think about how to guide her future." Guide. That word made me stop in the hallway. "What about our son?" my father asked. My mother sighed softly. "He's stressed with his studies. He needs support. She's doing well. Maybe she can help him a little. It's all one family after all." I stood there frozen. One family. Funny how those words only mattered when someone needed something from me. I went to my room quietly, closing the door without making a sound. And for the first time, I realized the truth wasn't that they didn't see me. It was that they only saw me when I was useful. When I could offer something. When my success could benefit their favorite child. And I wasn't sure which hurt more, their past ignorance or their sudden attention. But I didn't react. Not yet. I needed time to think, to understand what they were planning, to see how far they would go. And deep down, a feeling started growing. Something calm but firm. A feeling that told me I needed to protect what I had built. Because soon they would ask for something unexpected. Something bigger. Something I would never have agreed to. And when they did, everything in our family shifted into a direction none of us were prepared for. Over the next few days, the energy in the house shifted in a way I couldn't fully explain. Nobody said anything directly to me, but everyone's behavior felt slightly off, like they were trying too hard to be normal. My mother suddenly became overly polite, asking if I'd eaten, asking if I needed new clothes, even offering to help clean my room, which she hadn't done since I was 12. My father checked in every evening like he was rehearsing some new role, nodding thoughtfully whenever I mentioned my work even though he clearly didn't understand a word of it. And my brother? Well, he walked around with this strange confidence, the kind people get when they think something good is about to happen for them. And all of it made me uneasy. It felt like everyone was waiting for the right moment to say something. The quiet didn't last long. One evening after dinner, my parents asked me to sit with them for a bit. My mother said it with that careful, soft voice she used whenever she wanted something. I already knew this wasn't a casual conversation. My brother sat on the sofa too, pretending he wasn't involved, but the way he kept glancing at me told me everything. My father started, clearing his throat like he was giving a speech. "We've been thinking about your future," he said. "You're doing well with your tech work." Tech work? Always so vague. My mother nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, and we think it's time to make it more structured. More official." I waited, silent. My father leaned forward. "Your brother is applying for an important university program, and if he gets in, it will open many doors for him. But it also means the family needs to adjust financially." I already knew where this was going. My mother added, "And since you've started earning, we feel it's only fair that everyone contributes." There it was, the first layer of the conflict they'd been building. I kept my voice even. "Contributes how?" My father exchanged a quick glance with my mother before saying, "Just a small portion from your income. Nothing dramatic. Just support for your brother's future. After all, he's under a lot of pressure." My brother didn't speak, but the hopeful look on his face was enough. I didn't answer. I simply nodded once, stood up, and went to my room without agreeing or disagreeing. They didn't stop me. They thought I'd eventually come around. But they underestimated something. They didn't understand how long I had been invisible, how long I had swallowed their favoritism, how deeply their words from that night still echoed inside me. And for once, I wasn't reacting emotionally. I was thinking clearly. And what I realized was simple. They didn't see me as someone building something important. They saw me as a backup plan. But the conversation didn't end there. It was only the first step. Over the next week, my parents kept dropping hints. Little comments like, "Family supports each other," or "Your brother deserves a chance to shine," or "You're lucky you're good with computers. Maybe you can help him too." Every time, the pressure in my chest tightened a little more. One morning, my mother entered my room holding a folder. She placed it on my desk and said, "Look through this when you can. It's related to your work." My first instinct was to ignore it, but curiosity won. When she left, I opened the folder, and what I found inside made my stomach twist. Inside were printed emails from small businesses I had worked with, details of my projects, screenshots of messages where clients praised what I built. My mother had gone through my laptop or my phone, I didn't know which, and gathered everything she could find. And taped to the front of the folder was a handwritten note in her neat, cursive handwriting. You have talent. Think about how this can benefit the family. I sat there staring at the paper, trying to process the idea that they had been watching my work more closely than I realized. Not out of pride, but out of strategy. Later that day, my brother approached me again, leaning against my doorframe with that casual arrogance he didn't even notice he had. So, he said, did you talk to Mom and Dad about helping me? I looked up at him. Why do you need money? He shrugged. Application fees. Laptop. Travel stuff. You know. I didn't respond. He sighed and added, come on, you know I need this. They said you're doing really good, right? So just help out. That line, they said you're doing really good, revealed everything. My success didn't exist for me. It was ammunition for them. A resource. A tool. A safety net. My silence seemed to annoy him. He scoffed and walked out muttering, it's not that deep. You're being dramatic. But it was deep. Much deeper than he realized. The tension grew thicker that week. Every conversation felt like a negotiation. Every expression in the house carried a question underneath. My parents were careful, but they weren't subtle. They kept trying different angles, gentle persuasion, emotional guilt, family duty, and all of it only made me retreat into myself more. One afternoon, my father came home earlier than usual. He found me in the kitchen and asked me to talk. He seemed calmer than before, softer. You know, he said, I want you to understand we only want the best for both of you. I didn't say anything. I'm proud of what you're building, he continued. Really I am. But your brother is under pressure. He's always been the one we expected to succeed in the traditional way. And now you're doing well too. So why not help him? You two could support each other. His words were gentle, but they carried the same expectation. Help him. Support him. Share what's yours. Then he said something that unsettled me more than anything else. You have something stable now, but your brother needs a push. Once he settles, he'll take care of you too. That's how family works. Take care of me? So they didn't see me as independent. They didn't see my work as a real future. They still saw me as the background child who would eventually need my brother to help or guide me. And the worst part? They believed they were being reasonable. That night, I sat at my desk going through my messages. More clients. More opportunities. People saw me, strangers, teachers, community members. Everyone except my own family. And I realized something painful but important. I wasn't just fighting for my career. I was fighting for the right to own my accomplishments. Meanwhile, another subplot quietly formed without me noticing at first. One of my older cousins reached out to me after hearing from my mother. She messaged me asking if I could mentor her younger brother in tech. Then another relative asked if I could build a website for cheap. Word had clearly spread. My talent was now a family resource. The more people asked, the more suffocating it felt. They didn't care about the story behind my work. They didn't know the nights I stayed up learning. They only cared that it was convenient for them. And all of this was building towards something unavoidable. My parents finally sat me down again, this time with a seriousness that made my chest feel tight. My mother looked me straight in the eyes and said, "We've decided something important." Before she continued, my brother walked into the room and sat beside her like he already knew. My father spoke next. "We think it's best for the family if your brother becomes a part of your tech work." My heart dropped. He continued, "He will help manage things. You two can work together. He can handle communication, finances, whatever you need. You'll get more opportunities with him involved." My mother smiled gently. "And since he's older, he can guide you. It will be a proper business if you two run it together." Guide me. Every word felt like its own sting. Then came the final blow. "And eventually," my father said quietly, "the business can be in both your names. Both our names." But their eyes told me the truth. They didn't want a partnership. They wanted control. They wanted the golden child to benefit from the work I built in silence. And in that moment, I felt something rising inside me. Something calm. Something steady. Because they had no idea what I was about to do next. The next few days felt like walking on a tightrope. Every glance, every word, every gesture in the house carried weight. My parents moved with quiet anticipation, like they were waiting for me to give in. My brother acted like he owned the future I had been quietly building for myself, dropping comments about how we could share responsibilities or work together as a team. He didn't understand that I wasn't interested in teamwork. Not with him. Not with people who had spent years ignoring me. Not with people who suddenly saw me as a resource instead of a person. I spent hours alone in my room staring at my projects, feeling the tension tighten in my chest. I thought about every achievement, every late night, every small victory that had been mine alone. And now, in their eyes, it was no longer just mine. Suddenly, everything I had built became a bargaining chip for their idea of family unity. I started noticing how subtly my parents tried to manipulate the situation. My mom would casually ask about clients, adding, "Your brother might be able to help you handle that. It's always good to have family support." My father would talk about the future as if I had no choice in the matter. "This is an opportunity for both of you. You'll see how much easier it will be with him involved," he said one evening while flipping through my project notes. They weren't asking. They were suggesting it as if it was already decided. I realized the more I stayed silent, the more control they thought they had. And the more they pushed, the more I felt something solidify inside me, a line I wouldn't cross. I couldn't let them take my work and my independence, even if it meant challenging the entire family dynamic. I couldn't let my brother, who had been shielded all these years, step into a world I had built on my own terms and claim it as his own. Then came the evening that pushed everything toward the breaking point. My parents sat me down again, this time in the living room, and my brother flopped onto the couch like he had been rehearsing for this moment. My mother smiled at me in that carefully measured way she did when she wanted compliance. My father's hands rested on the armrest, tense but controlled. "We've been thinking," my father began, "that your business can grow faster if you work together. Your brother has some good ideas too. He can help you expand." I looked at him, trying to measure his sincerity. I didn't see pride. I didn't see excitement. I saw strategy, control. Their carefully constructed vision of family success that only existed if I agreed to hand over part of what was mine. My brother grinned, the kind of smug smile people wear when they think the world owes them something. "I could even handle some of the client meetings," he said casually. "You've been doing all the work anyway. I can take care of the rest." I didn't respond. Not yet. My heart was racing, my mind running through every possible outcome. This wasn't just about money or business. It was about respect, recognition, and finally standing up for myself. My mother leaned forward, her voice soft. "We just want to see you succeed, and your brother can help you. Don't you want that?" I realized then how long they had been shaping this. Every compliment, every casual question, every tiny suggestion over the past weeks had been a way to prepare me. They wanted me to think it was a reasonable choice. They wanted me to believe it was for my benefit, when really, it was about control, hierarchy, and family image. The room felt smaller with every passing second. My brother shifted in his seat, expecting me to respond, expecting me to agree without thought. My parents leaned closer, trying to make me feel like resistance was unnecessary, almost ungrateful. And I knew that if I said nothing, if I hesitated too long, they would take my silence as consent. I felt anger bubbling inside me, but it wasn't the loud, explosive kind. It was calm, sharp, and focused. I knew I couldn't give them what they wanted, not without losing a part of myself I'd worked too hard to protect. And I also knew that pushing back could make things worse, could shatter the fragile balance of the family entirely. The tension became almost unbearable. My brother's grin widened, my mother's smile never wavered, and my father's calm voice became heavier with unspoken expectation. Every second felt like a test. Every look felt like an accusation. Every word was a thread in the invisible trap they had been setting. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing thoughts. My projects, my success, my independence, they were all on the line. And suddenly the choice became clearer. I could either bend to their plan and give away the part of myself I valued most, or I could take a risk, push back, and face the storm I knew was coming. I felt the adrenaline building. My parents were waiting, my brother was waiting, and the moment I spoke could change everything. One word could shift the balance of power, and one decision could change the family dynamic forever. My mind raced through every scenario. What if I refused? What if I agreed but secretly kept control? What if I did something entirely unexpected, something they would never see coming? Every possibility carried risk, but staying silent carried even more. The room was tense, the air heavy. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and steady, echoing the decision I had been holding inside me for weeks. The calm before a storm, the moment where everything hangs by a thread. And then my father leaned closer, his voice gentle but pressing. "So, what do you think? Are you ready to take this next step?" The words hung in the air, weighted with expectation, pressure, and unspoken consequences. My mother's eyes glimmered with that familiar combination of hope and strategy. My brother looked at me like the world already belonged to him. It was the moment I had been anticipating, the moment where all the quiet planning, all the tension, all the silent frustration, and all the hidden strength I had built inside me would have to come to the surface. And in that moment, I knew that whatever I chose to do next wouldn't just decide the future of my projects. It would decide the future of how my family saw me and maybe even how I saw myself. Everything I had kept inside, every unspoken word, every ignored effort, every moment of being invisible, was about to collide in this one defining moment. And there was no turning back. Just when I thought the tension had reached its peak, the unexpected happened. My phone buzzed on the desk beside me, a message from a client I hadn't expected to hear from for weeks. I glanced at it, expecting a simple update, but the words on the screen made my stomach drop. The client wasn't just praising my work. They were offering a serious partnership, something that could expand my small business far beyond what I had imagined. They wanted me to lead it, to own it completely, and they made it clear that it was time-sensitive. The opportunity was huge. Life-changing. I sat frozen, reading the message again. The timing couldn't have been worse, or better depending on how I chose to look at it. My parents were still leaning in, waiting for my answer about giving my brother control of my work. My brother was grinning like the world already belonged to him. And now, a real opportunity had landed in my hands, one that could prove to them that I didn't need their guidance or his involvement. For a brief moment, I imagined telling them, "I have my own plan. I don't need help. I don't need you." But even as the words formed in my mind, I realized the storm that would follow. This was the moment where everything could break. My parents had been subtly controlling me for years. My brother had been groomed to think he was the golden child. Revealing this opportunity could either earn me the recognition I deserved or make me the enemy in my own home. The next morning I tried to act normal. I went to school, attended my classes, and pretended I wasn't carrying the weight of a decision that could change everything. But at lunch I overheard my brother talking to one of his friends, bragging about how soon he'd be running my business with my parents' support. He didn't know I was standing right behind him. He didn't know I had already received a real offer that could make him irrelevant in a matter of weeks. That bragging ignited something inside me. I realized they had all assumed I would quietly hand over control. They assumed I would bend like always. And I knew that if I didn't act carefully, they could ruin the opportunity before I even got a chance to prove myself. That evening my parents sat me down again. The living room felt smaller than ever, heavy with their expectations. They didn't know about the partnership yet, but I could feel it. The way they looked at me, the way their eyes waited for compliance, the way they already assumed my answer would match their plan. My brother leaned casually on the armrest, giving me that confident grin that made my blood boil. "We've been thinking," my father began, "that it might be better if you start sharing responsibilities immediately. It'll help both of you grow, and your brother can help expand your work." I stayed quiet. My mother's voice cut in, softer, persuasive. "Think about it. You've done so much already, but having someone you trust at your side can take you further than you could ever go alone." I wanted to scream. Trust? The only thing I felt from them was pressure. And as I kept silent, I noticed my brother shift, leaning forward, like he could sense my hesitation. That grin never left his face. Then, right in the middle of this pressure-filled conversation, my phone buzzed again. This time I couldn't ignore it. I slipped it open, pretending to check the time. The new message was from the same client, an urgent reminder that the partnership offer had a deadline. If I didn't respond, the opportunity would go to someone else. My parents noticed immediately. My mother's eyes flicked to the phone. "Who's that?" she asked casually, but I could see the flicker of concern behind her smile. "It's just a client," I said, keeping my tone neutral. My father leaned in slightly. "A client? That's nice, but your brother's future is also important. Don't you think we should focus on the family plan first?" And there it was, the subtle threat masked as advice. The reminder that my independence wasn't meant to matter more than what they had already decided. I realized then that I was no longer just facing one conflict. I was facing two. The first was obvious, my parents and brother trying to take control of what was mine. The second was more insidious, the risk of losing a life-changing opportunity because they assumed I would comply without question. And if I acted too hastily, I could lose both, the chance for independence and my relationship with the family I still cared about. The tension became unbearable. I could feel it coiling tighter in my chest. My brother kept leaning casually in his chair, acting as though the decision was already his. My parents' faces were calm, but their eyes were calculating, measuring how far they could push me before I gave in. I realized that any reaction I had would set off a chain of events I couldn't predict. I retreated to my room under the pretense of needing to think. Once inside, I locked the door and stared at my laptop. The client's offer glowed on the screen, waiting for my response. My projects, my work, my late nights, my sacrifices, it was all on the line. And now, for the first time, it felt like the entire future I had been quietly building was in a race against time and family expectation. I thought about all the years of being invisible, all the moments they had overlooked me, all the comparisons to my brother. And I realized I had a choice. I could either give in, hand over control and live under their rules, or I could take the risk, step into the unknown and assert my independence. But the problem was, I didn't know what would happen if I chose independence. Would they respect it? Would my brother try to sabotage me? Or would this finally push the family dynamic into chaos? As I sat there, my mind spinning, another layer of complication emerged. My cousin, who had previously asked me for tech advice, called unexpectedly. She said she had been talking to my parents and my brother, and they suggested she get involved with my projects too. Suddenly, what I thought was only about my family's pressure now included others. People who might unknowingly interfere, influenced by my parents' plans. The stakes had just escalated further. The room felt colder. The pressure tighter. The opportunity waiting on my screen was no longer just a chance to grow. It had become a test, a trap, and a challenge all at once. And as I stared at the blinking cursor, I realized the story I had been living, one of being invisible, overlooked, underestimated, was about to explode in ways none of us could have predicted. The choice I made next would set everything in motion. Not just my future but the future of my family, my brother, and my work. And I knew that the next step I took could either destroy everything or finally give me the recognition I had been waiting for all my life. The tension was unbearable. Every second I hesitated, the walls seemed to close in more, the eyes of my family haunted me, and the weight of opportunity pressed down harder. This wasn't just a decision anymore. It was a turning point. A moment where the smallest action, or inaction, could change everything forever. And right at that moment I realized something terrifying. The storm was coming and no one, not even me, knew exactly how it would hit. I took a deep breath and stared at the screen one last time. The cursor blinked, almost taunting me, daring me to act. My parents were downstairs waiting. My brother thought he had already won. My entire childhood of being overlooked and underestimated boiled into one clear, simple truth. This was my moment. If I hesitated, I'd lose not just control of my work, but a part of myself I had fought to protect for years. I picked up my phone and called the client. My voice was calm, deliberate. "I want to take this partnership," I said, "but I'll be running it myself." There was a pause on the other end, a brief silence filled with surprise, and then an enthusiastic agreement. They trusted me, and in that instant the weight in my chest lifted slightly. This was my future, my work, my independence. I hung up and walked into the living room, trying to appear composed. My parents were sitting together, my brother leaning back with his usual grin. I knew what they expected me to say. I could almost hear their thoughts. Just agree. Give him some control. Keep the family peace. But I couldn't. Not this time. "I've made a decision," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I appreciate everything you've done, but my projects are mine. I'll be running them independently. No one else will be managing my work, not my brother, not anyone else." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut through. My parents' smiles faltered, my father's hand gripped the armrest tighter, and my mother's calm demeanor wavered for the first time. My brother's grin disappeared, replaced by something close to shock. "But," my father started, trying to negotiate, "think about what we said, about supporting him, working together." "I've thought about it," I interrupted. "And I've decided my work and my effort belong to me. I'll help when I choose to, not because anyone expects it." My brother opened his mouth, but I held his gaze. For once he didn't speak. My mother finally said something, quieter this time, almost pleading. "Are you sure? You're still young, maybe it's better to have family involved." I shook my head. "I'm sure. This is my future, and I'm taking responsibility for it myself." For a moment there was nothing but tension. I thought I had finally asserted myself, that I had drawn a line they couldn't cross. And in a way I had. I felt a rush of relief, of clarity, of independence I hadn't experienced before. But then the unexpected happened. My father leaned back slowly, a faint smile appearing, almost sly, calculated. "Well," he said, "if that's your decision, then I suppose there's nothing more to discuss. But one thing you should know, He paused and my heart began to race. What? I asked cautiously. He looked directly at me, a seriousness in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Your brother? He's already started his own small tech project on the side. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? He's been learning, experimenting, my father continued. He's been quietly building just like you did. And he plans to launch it soon. He wants to compete with you. The room seemed to shrink around me. My brother, who had been riding on my family's favoritism, had secretly been working on something that could rival mine. And now, all the control I thought I had secured wasn't guaranteed anymore. My mother spoke softly, almost admiringly. We just thought you should know. It's impressive how both of you have been working in secret. I felt my hands tighten into fists. Years of being overlooked, underestimated, and compared were colliding with the reality that my independence would now face direct competition. My brother had not been passive. He had been quietly building his own path. My brother's grin returned, but this time it wasn't smugness. It was determination. I told myself I'd catch up someday, he said quietly. I didn't want to ask for your help. I wanted to do it myself. For a moment I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to be angry. Part of me wanted to gloat. But another part of me, perhaps the largest, felt a strange respect. My brother, the golden child, the one who had always been favored, had finally stepped out of the shadow and tried to earn his own place. I realized then that this wasn't just about protecting my work anymore. It was about navigating a completely new dynamic, one where I couldn't rely on family loyalty or expectations, but only on my own skill, determination, and creativity. The challenge had escalated in a way I hadn't anticipated, and the real test of what I had built and what I stood for was just beginning. I took a deep breath, letting the tension in the room settle slightly. Then we'll see who succeeds on their own terms, I said quietly, locking eyes with him. The air was heavy, but there was an unspoken agreement forming. No shortcuts, no favoritism, no assumptions. For the first time we were equals in ambition. And yet, even as I felt that surge of empowerment, there was a nagging thought I couldn't shake. My parents had always been strategic, always planning, always shaping the narrative. What if this wasn't over? What if there was another layer I hadn't seen? The final twist lingered in the back of my mind, a quiet, uneasy feeling that the real story wasn't just about me or my brother, but about the family itself and how far they were willing to go to protect their version of success. I had won control over my projects, but the game had changed entirely. And in that moment, I realized this was only the beginning. The rivalry, the ambition, the need to prove ourselves, it wasn't just about projects or money anymore. It was about identity, recognition, and finally claiming the respect we had both been denied for years. The room was silent, the tension still thick, but the balance had shifted. And as I looked at my brother, I understood that the story I thought I had finished writing had taken a sudden, unpredictable turn. Neither of us would ever see the family the same way again. And somewhere deep inside I knew that the real challenge, one that could reshape everything, was still ahead. The next few weeks felt like stepping into an entirely new world. My brother and I had both decided to work independently, each focused on our own projects, but the unspoken tension between us remained. There were moments of quiet observation, where we would glance at each other's work, measuring progress, silently acknowledging the challenge without speaking a word. Our parents watched closely, unsure how to intervene now that the playing field was level. I spent long hours building and refining my tech projects, pouring every bit of effort and creativity into them. The partnership opportunity from the client became a reality, and soon I was running my own small business independently. It was exhilarating. For the first time, the recognition I had been craving was real, not just from family but from people who saw my skill and valued my work. It felt like reclaiming a part of myself I hadn't realized had been missing for so long. At home, things began to shift subtly. My parents, no longer able to control the outcome through favoritism, started interacting differently. My mother still smiled and asked questions, but now it felt genuine rather than strategic. My father offered advice occasionally, but he left the decisions to me, which was new and surprisingly comforting. Even my brother started showing signs of maturity. He asked for tips rather than instructions, and I noticed he was learning to manage his own projects without expecting me to hand over guidance or resources. One afternoon, I found him in my workspace quietly working on his laptop. He didn't look up as I entered. I hesitated, unsure how to approach him after all the tension, but then he spoke. "Hey, I just wanted to say thanks," he said softly. "I know I've been spoiled and I haven't always been fair. I'm trying to fix that, starting with my work." I paused, surprised. His words weren't boastful or competitive, they were sincere. I nodded. "It's a start," I said. And in that moment something shifted. The rivalry that had defined our relationship for so long softened into a cautious respect. I realized that independence wasn't just about my projects. It was about finding a balance where both of us could grow without tearing each other down. Over time, my parents came to understand that their favoritism had caused tension and resentment. There were no dramatic apologies or emotional breakthroughs at first, but their actions began to speak louder than words. They started treating both of us equally, asking about our progress, celebrating achievements without comparison, and gradually letting us make our own choices. The phrase, "our pride and joy," no longer had a single target. It applied to both of us in different ways, and it finally felt authentic. My cousin, who had previously asked me for mentorship, became a collaborator in a healthy way. She respected the boundaries I had set and even helped me manage certain parts of my growing business. It was a reminder that success didn't have to come at the expense of family dynamics, as long as expectations and boundaries were clear. Looking back, the greatest lessons weren't about money, recognition, or competition. They were about self-respect and persistence. I realized that being overlooked for years had taught me resilience. I had learned to work quietly, to value my own efforts, and to recognize that true accomplishment doesn't require external approval. The experience strengthened my confidence in ways I wouldn't have understood as a child. My brother and I still had moments of tension, but they became opportunities to communicate rather than compete. We began sharing advice, celebrating milestones, and even joking about past misunderstandings. The golden child dynamic faded, replaced by a relationship built on understanding, effort, and a recognition that both of us could succeed independently. I also reflected on my parents' role. Their actions had been frustrating, even hurtful, but I began to see that their intentions, while misguided, came from a place of love and tradition. They wanted to protect us, even if their approach was flawed. Over time, we reached an unspoken truce. They would support us, but we would lead our own paths. The balance of authority shifted, and with it came a new sense of freedom. The opportunity that had forced me to stand up for myself, the partnership with the client, became the turning point. It validated everything I had worked for, showed me the power of independence, and taught me the importance of setting boundaries. I learned that true respect isn't given. It's earned through consistency, integrity, and determination. My family had tried to shape me to fit their expectations, but in asserting myself, I had reshaped the way they saw me, and in doing so, reshaped my own identity. Months later, both my brother and I were thriving in our own ways. His project, though initially overshadowed by my business, gained traction, and he began to understand the value of hard work and persistence. My success no longer felt hollow because it had been hard-earned and fully recognized by both myself and those who mattered most. The family home, once a place of quiet tension and comparison, now felt lighter, filled with cautious pride and mutual understanding. I realized that the story wasn't just about proving my worth, it was about learning to navigate complex relationships, asserting independence without severing bonds, and finding balance in a family that had long misunderstood me. I had grown stronger, more self-aware, and more capable of handling challenges that I would have once avoided. The conflicts that had seemed insurmountable were now lessons etched into my experience, shaping my decisions and my outlook on life. And yet, even as peace settled in, there was an unexpected twist, one that reminded me that life rarely follows a straight path. One morning, I received an anonymous message from someone who had been observing our family dynamics and our projects. The message hinted at an external opportunity, an investor interested in supporting both my brother and me in a collaborative venture. It was a chance to take what had been a rivalry and turn it into a partnership that could benefit both of us while preserving our independence. I stared at the message, the weight of possibility settling over me. It was unexpected, but it carried promise. I realized that even after resolving the tension, life still held surprises, and sometimes, those surprises offered the chance to turn past conflicts into future opportunities. The lesson was clear. Standing up for yourself doesn't just protect what's yours, it opens doors you never knew existed. Respect, recognition, and independence aren't given. They're claimed, nurtured, and defended with courage and patience. And even when life presents new challenges, the skills, resilience, and confidence you build from asserting your own path can carry you further than anyone else's approval ever could. As I sat back, reflecting on the journey, I felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The golden child comparisons, the favoritism, the tension, all of it had taught me something invaluable. I had learned to recognize my worth, assert boundaries, and navigate family dynamics with intelligence and grace. I had turned years of being overlooked into motivation, and the result was not just a thriving business, but a newfound clarity about who I was and what I was capable of. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly seen, not just by strangers, not just by clients, but by myself. The family had shifted too, learning to respect us both for our unique paths, our choices, and the hard work that had defined our growth. What began as a story of comparison and favoritism had transformed into a story of self-empowerment, resilience, and unexpected opportunities. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, I knew I had the tools, the confidence, and the independence to shape it on my terms. And that realization, the knowledge that I could face any challenge without losing myself, was the most satisfying victory of all. As I closed my laptop that evening, I looked across the room at my brother, who was quietly working on his own project, and smiled. We were no longer in competition. We were two individuals, each carving our own path, learning to coexist in a family that had finally started to understand the value of seeing both of us. The journey had been difficult, emotional, and full of surprises, but in the end we had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. And even though life promised more unexpected twists ahead, one truth remained clear. I had earned my place, my voice, and my independence, and no one could take that away.